They said she would break under pressure, that she wasn't fit for the field. But in less than 3 minutes, she proved them wrong, dropping 9 armed hostiles with a precision so cold and calculated. The battlefield itself seemed to stand still. Elena Hayes sat alone in the dimly lit corner of the barracks, her hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, the murmurs of the other operators swirling around her like a low hum. She didn't have to hear the words clearly to know what they were saying. She'd heard them 100 times before. Too small, too fragile, not ready for the field. They didn't say it to her face anymore, but the sideways glances, the forced smiles, and the exclusion from mission briefings spoke louder than any insult. She was the only woman in her tactical unit, and while she could outshoot, outrun, and outthink half the men there, the shadow of doubt followed her everywhere. The commanders praised her in training, but when it came to deployment, she was always kept in reserve, as if her presence on the front lines was a risk they couldn't afford. It burned inside her. Every drill she nailed perfectly, every obstacle she crushed, all dismissed as theory by men who had never seen her under fire. That morning, as she adjusted her gear and prepared for yet another low-priority recon mission, she told herself she didn't care anymore. But deep down, she was waiting for the moment when she could prove them wrong, not with words but with action. When the mission started, it was supposed to be routine. No heavy contact, no real danger. But 30 minutes into the operation, the situation shifted violently. The team was ambushed. Comms were scrambled. Gunfire exploded from the shadows. And in that chaos, Elena found herself cut off from her unit, standing at the far end of a derelict warehouse. Alone, armed, and staring at 9 armed hostiles who had just cornered her team. It was the moment she'd been waiting for her entire life. The air inside the warehouse felt heavy, thick with the stench of oil and rust. Elena's heart pounded in her ears, but her breathing stayed steady, years of training kicking in. The hostiles spread out in a loose formation, weapons up, their boots crunching over shards of broken glass. They hadn't noticed her fully yet, distracted by the shouting and movement from the rest of her pinned-down team. She knew she had seconds, maybe less, before they would turn their full attention on her. Her mind mapped the room in an instant, 9 targets, varying distances, cover points, and an escape route that didn't exist unless she created one. She slid behind a stack of old shipping crates, her fingers flicking the safety off her rifle. Every doubt she'd ever heard replayed in her head like a challenge, liability, weak, deadweight. But instead of shaking her, those words ignited something primal. One of the men stepped closer, his rifle barrel sweeping toward her position. Without hesitation, she rose from cover and fired. The first shot dropped him instantly. The second found its mark before the rest even processed what had happened. Chaos erupted, shouts in a language she didn't recognize, boots scattering, the metallic ping of bullets ricocheting off steel. She moved with surgical precision, every shot deliberate, every movement calculated to keep them disoriented. Her body flowed through the environment like water, using walls, shadows, and debris to vanish and reappear where they least expected. 5 were down before the others realized they weren't hunting prey. They were being hunted. And yet, Elena knew this was far from over. The remaining 4 were regrouping, getting smarter, and their next move would be to flush her out. Her ammo was limited, her team was still trapped, and she was running out of time. Elena's breath came slow and controlled, her ears tuned to every faint shuffle of boots and scrape of metal. The last 4 hostiles had gone silent, too silent. That meant they were repositioning, trying to box her in. She crouched low, letting her fingers trace the cold steel floor until she found a loose piece of rebar. It wasn't much, but it could be the distraction she needed. From her vantage point behind a rusted forklift, she spotted the glint of a rifle barrel poking out from a gap in the stacked crates. She hurled the rebar across the room, the clang echoing like a gunshot. As the hostile jerked his head toward the sound, Elena squeezed off a single, clean shot. 3 left. The silence broke with a hail of gunfire, sparks dancing off the metal around her. She rolled into a shadowed alcove, her brain working faster than the bullets whizzing past. The warehouse's flickering overhead lights cast long, distorted shadows, and she decided to use them. Staying low, she slipped between stacks of crates, her movements ghost-like, never in the same place twice. One of the men made the mistake of rushing her position, assuming she was cornered. Elena met him head-on, disarming him in a fluid motion and sending him crashing to the ground with the butt of his own weapon. Two left now, their shouts growing frantic, their confidence unraveling. Her team's muffled voices reached her from somewhere deeper inside the warehouse. Desperate, but alive. That fueled her next move. She darted toward the far end, where the last two were taking cover. They fired wildly, but Elena had already anticipated their angles, weaving through the chaos. In less than a heartbeat, one was down, and the other was staring down the cold barrel of her rifle. The tide had turned, and Elena was no longer the one being underestimated. The final hostile dropped his weapon, his eyes wide with disbelief as Elena pressed the barrel against his chest. "Keys, now," she ordered, her voice low but carrying a steel edge that left no room for hesitation. He fumbled with trembling hands, pulling a small ring of keys from his pocket. Without breaking eye contact, she snatched them, shoved him to the ground, and sprinted toward the intersection of the warehouse. The heavy metal door groaned as she unlocked it, the smell of damp concrete and fear rushing out to meet her. Inside, her teammates were bound, their eyes lighting up the moment they saw her. "Took you long enough?" One of them joked weakly, his voice cracked but relieved. She cut through the restraints with a knife she'd taken from the second-to-last hostile, her hands steady despite the adrenaline roaring through her veins. "We move now," she said, helping the first man to his feet. The rest followed, each leaning on her for strength as they limped toward the exit. The sound of sirens in the distance promised backup was finally on its way, but Elena knew they weren't safe yet. The building's skeletal metal frame groaned in the night wind, and she could hear the faint hum of a vehicle pulling up outside. Too smooth to be police. Her instincts screamed danger. She quickly herded her team toward the side entrance, keeping her rifle at the ready. They burst into the cold night air, steam rising from their breath as the headlights of a black SUV cut across the yard. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then the driver's door opened, and an unfamiliar figure stepped out, silhouetted in the glare. Elena tightened her grip on her weapon, ready for whatever came next, because this night wasn't done testing her. The figure stepped forward, the SUV's lights casting sharp shadows across his face. It was Commander Hayes, their long-lost mission handler, thought to be killed months ago. "Stand down, Elena," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Her rifle didn't waver. "Prove it's you," she demanded. Hayes gave their old unit's silent hand signal, the one only a handful of people could know. Slowly, she lowered her weapon, but the tension in her body didn't fade. "We don't have time," Hayes continued. "The rest of their reinforcements are minutes out. Get your people in." Without hesitation, she loaded her wounded teammates into the SUV. The moment the doors slammed shut, Hayes floored the accelerator, tearing away from the warehouse just as blacked-out trucks roared into the yard behind them. No one spoke during the ride. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the labored breathing of the rescued. When they reached the safe zone, Elena stepped out, the cold night air hitting her like a wave. A group of officers stood waiting, some of the same ones who had once called her a liability. Now, they stared at her with a mix of awe and shame. One of them approached, eyes downcast. "We were wrong about you," he said quietly. Elena gave a faint smile, the kind that didn't seek approval. "You don't have to believe in me," she replied. "You just have to believe I'll get the job done." As medics rushed her team away, she glanced at the fading horizon. She had neutralized 9 hostiles alone, rescued her entire squad, and evaded a full-scale enemy pursuit, on a mission she wasn't even supposed to be on. The doubt they'd placed on her name had been erased in one night, replaced with something no one could take away: unshakable respect. If this story inspired you, show your support by liking, commenting, and sharing it with others who value real courage. Subscribe to Unheard Heroes for more unforgettable tales of bravery and sacrifice.